Red Mesa baked beneath the late afternoon sun, its wooden buildings bleached the color of old bone. Dust drifted through the single main street like smoke from a dying fire, settling on boots, wagon wheels, and the pride of the man who stood at its center. Sheriff Caleb Harlan leaned against the hitching post outside the saloon. Thumbs hooked in his gun belt, hat tipped back just enough to show his cold blue eyes. He liked to be seen this way, relaxed, unchallenged, untouchable. The badge on his chest caught the sunlight, flashing whenever he shifted. A small reminder to everyone in town of who ruled Red Mesa. Harlan had been a cavalry officer once, back when the war gave men excuses to become monsters and medals for surviving it. When the uniforms were folded away and the killing moved west, he followed. Red Mesa needed a sheriff, and Harlan needed a place where his past wouldn't ask questions. Out here, authority was simple: a gun, a badge, and a reputation for using both. Laughter rolled out of the saloon as a drunk ranch hand stumbled into the street, spinning a half-finished tale. "I'm telling you," the man slurred, "saw an Apache Ridge walking last night. Right up on Black Ridge, clear as day." The laughter sharpened. Someone spat into the dirt. Sheriff Harlan straightened slowly, smiling like a man about to enjoy himself. "An Apache?" he said loudly. "Out here?" He chuckled and shook his head. "You boys been listening to ghost stories again. Ain't an Apache warrior left who dare come within 20 miles of this town." The ranch hand frowned. "Swear it, Sheriff." "He didn't move like no ghost." Harlan stepped forward, boots crunching on gravel. "Let me tell you something about Apaches," he said, voice carrying easily down the street. "They run when they're shot at, and they die when they don't. Same as any other man. Difference is, folks like you keep pretending there's something more." He turned, sweeping his gaze across the small crowd. "This here's Red Mesa. Law lives here. And I am that law." A few men laughed again, louder this time, eager to stay on the winning side of the joke. Others didn't. An old shopkeeper lowered his eyes. A Mexican trader near the well crossed himself quietly. Even the wind seemed to pause, as if listening. Harlan noticed none of it, or chose not to. He'd heard the rumors for days now. Burned tracks north of town. A missing mule. A stagecoach found abandoned, its strongbox untouched. The smarter part of him knew what those signs could mean. But smarter instincts had a way of sounding like fear, and fear was a luxury Harlan could not afford. Fear had ruled his life once, on a night years ago when a village burned and screams filled the desert air. He had buried that memory deep, beneath bravado and whiskey and the certainty that winners wrote the truth. He turned back toward the saloon. "Drink up, boys," he called. "If there's a red ghost wandering the hills, I'll have him wearing irons before sundown. Dead or breathin'. Makes no difference to me." As he pushed through the swinging doors, a gust of wind swept down the street, lifting dust into the air. For a brief moment, it formed a shape tall, still. Watching before scattering again. High on Black Ridge, far beyond the town's laughter and lies, a lone figure stood silhouetted against the dying sun. He did not move. He had already heard the sheriff's challenge. They brought the Apache into Red Mesa just before noon, when the sun hung high and merciless and the whole town could see. A pair of deputies rode ahead, rifles across their saddles, while a third led the prisoner on foot behind them. The man's wrists were bound in iron, linked by a short chain that forced his hands low and close together. His ankles were shackled too, each step measured, deliberate. He did not stumble. He did not look afraid. Sheriff Caleb Harlan stood outside the jailhouse, waiting. "Is that him?" someone whispered from the boardwalk. The prisoner was tall, lean as a wolf starved down to muscle and bone. His hair fell loose to his shoulders, streaked with dust and silver that caught the light. Old scars crossed his chest where his buckskin shirt hung open. pale lines etched deep into dark skin. One ran from collarbone to ribs, a blade mark that had healed wrong. Another puckered circle sat just below his shoulder, an old bullet wound. Harlan's eyes lingered on that one. "Well, I'll be damned," the sheriff said, loud enough for the gathering crowd. "He bleeds after all." The deputy holding the chain hesitated. "Found him north of the coach road, Sheriff. No weapons on him, just—" "Stand in there? Stand in?" Harlan snorted. That's what they all say when they don't want to admit they got scared. The Apache said nothing. His gaze was steady, dark eyes reflecting no anger, no plea. He watched the town as if committing it to memory, the false fronts, the watching faces, the gallows beam rising behind the jail like a dead tree. Harlan stepped closer, circling him. "What's your name?" he asked. No answer. "Can you understand me, or do I gotta draw pictures?" Still nothing. A ripple of nervous laughter passed through the crowd. Harlan grinned, enjoying the tension. He reached out and lifted the chain with one finger, letting it jangle. "See this?" he said. "This is what happens when you come where you don't belong." The Apache's eyes finally met his. For just a moment, Harlan felt something tighten in his chest. Not fear, he would never have named it that, but a sudden sense of standing too close to a cliff's edge. The man's stare was not defiant. It was measuring. Harlan scoffed and turned away. "Throw him in a cell. We'll figure out what to do with him after dinner." As they led the prisoner past the saloon, an old man stepped forward, a former scout, his hair thin and white, his left hand missing 2 fingers. "Sheriff," the scout said carefully, "you should ask where he's from." Harlan didn't slow. "I know where he's from. Same place they all come from, trouble." The scout swallowed. "Some trouble don't come looking to steal." Harlan stopped then, slowly turned, and smiled without warmth. "You giving me advice, old man?" The scout lowered his eyes. "Just a warning." Harlan laughed and waved him off. "Save your warnings. This one's already finished." They locked the Apache into the far cell, iron bars clanging shut with finality. The heat inside the jail was thick, unmoving. Harlan leaned against the bars, folding his arms. "Now," he said, "you're gonna talk. Where were you headed?" Silence. "Who burned the stage?" Silence. Harlan's smile faded. He reached through the bars and grabbed the man's chin, forcing his face up. "You think playing dead makes you dangerous?" he said quietly. "I've buried men twice your size. You're nothing special." The Apache did not resist. He did not flinch. His voice, when it came, was low and calm, his English rough but clear. "I was already dead," he said. Harlan released him, stepping back with a sharp laugh to hide the chill that ran through him. "Well," the sheriff said, straightening his coat, "then hanging you won't make much difference, will it?" He turned and walked away, boots echoing down the corridor. Behind him, the Apache sat on the wooden bench, chains resting loosely against his wrists. Outside, the town buzzed with nervous energy. Inside the cell, the man closed his eyes not in despair, but in patience. High above Red Mesa, clouds slid across the sun, casting the jailhouse into sudden shadow. By sundown, Red Mesa no longer laughed. The heat broke as evening crept in, but unease settled heavier than the day's sun. People lingered in doorways instead of gathering in the street. Conversations dropped to murmurs that died when deputies passed. The jailhouse sat at the end of the road like a waiting jaw, its single-lit window glowing weak and yellow dot inside the saloon. Glasses clinked without cheer. A Mexican trader named Luis Marino leaned close to the bar, his voice low. "You see the scars on that man?" He asked no one in particular. "I have seen men come back from knife fights. I have seen men come back from bullets. But not like that." A card player snorted. "Every warrior's got scars. Moreno shook his head. Those were not battle scars. Those were survival marks. At the far table, the old scout Eli Boone sat with his whiskey untouched. His good eye stared into the amber liquid as if it might show him answers he didn't want. Finally, he pushed back his chair and stood. "I've seen him before," Eli said. The room stilled. "Where?" Someone asked. "Black Ridge. 10, maybe 12 years ago. Right after the Bear Creek massacre." A few men shifted uncomfortably. Bear Creek wasn't spoken of in Red Mesa, not openly. They said all of them were killed. A rancher muttered. Eli nodded slowly. "That's what the Army said." And most of it was true. But there was one they never found. Silence thickened. "They called him Taza," Eli went on. "Black Ridge Apache. Quiet man. Didn't shout in battle. Didn't boast. Just appeared where death was needed." Moreno crossed himself. "My father spoke of him. Said he walked out of fire with bullets in him and did not fall." A laugh broke out thin, forced. "You boys tellin' ghost stories now?" Eli turned to the man, his gaze hard. "You ever see a man track a cavalry patrol alone and kill 3 officers without leaving a trace?" "I did. I buried 2 of them myself." The laughter died. Outside, a woman hurried her children indoors as church bells rang the hour, though no service was called. The sound echoed strangely, as if the town itself were unsure why it rang them. At the jailhouse, Sheriff Harlan sat at his desk, boots up, reading an old Army ledger. He could hear the murmurs through the walls, feel them, really, like insects crawling under his skin. "Let 'em whisper," he muttered. Deputy Mills shifted nervously by the door. "Sheriff, some folks are saying that man's not just some stray." Harlan didn't look up. "Folks say lots of things when they're bored. They're saying his name." That got Harlan's attention. He lowered the book. "I don't care if they say he's the devil himself." Mills swallowed. "They're saying he died once already." Harlan stood abruptly and strode to the cell. The Apache sat as before, back straight, eyes open now, watching the bars as if they weren't there. The lamplight carved deep shadows across his face, making his scars seem to move. Harlan grabbed the bars. "Taza," he said, testing the name like a blade. "That ring any bells?" The man did not deny it. "You got people in this town spooked," Harlan said. "I don't like that." Taza's gaze lifted slowly. "You taught them fear," he said. "I only remind them where it belongs." Harlan felt heat rise in his face. "You think you're some kind of legend?" "I think," Taza replied, "that legends are made by men who survive what should have ended them." For a heartbeat, neither spoke. Somewhere outside, a horse screamed and kicked its stall, snapping a rope. Harlan stepped back, forcing a grin. "Enjoy your night," he said. "Tomorrow, the rope goes the other way." He left, slamming the door behind him. After midnight, a wind rose from the desert, low and mournful, carrying sand against windows and walls. People dreamed uneasily of fire in the dark, of footprints that ended abruptly, of eyes watching from the hills. In the jail, Taza closed his eyes and breathed slowly. He remembered Bear Creek. He remembered the soldiers. He remembered one officer who laughed as the village burned. And he remembered the badge that man wore. By morning, Red Mesa would understand why some names were better left buried. Morning came hard and bright, as if the sun itself meant to expose every lie in Red Mesa. Sheriff Caleb Harlan stood on the jailhouse porch, hands planted on his hips, watching the town gather. Word had spread faster than he'd expected. Men left their shops unlocked. Women watched from behind curtains. Even the preacher came, standing stiffly near the gallows, Bible clutched to his chest like a shield. Harlan had ordered the rope hung at first light. The gallows loomed beside the jail, newly repaired, its wood pale and raw. The noose swayed slightly in the breeze, creaking like an old hinge. Harlan liked the sound. It reminded people that order had weight. Deputy Mills approached, hat in his hands. "Sheriff, we could wait. Maybe send word to the fort. Make this official." Harlan shot him a look. "This is official. But if he's who they say," Harlan leaned close, "that's exactly why we do it now." The crowd fell quiet as the jail door opened. Two deputies dragged Taza out into the sunlight. Chains clinked with each step. The Apache warrior moved stiffly, not from fear but from restraint. His eyes narrowed against the glare. He took in the gallows, the faces, the distance to the horizon. Harlan stepped forward, voice booming. "People of Red Mesa," he announced, "this man stands accused of banditry, murder, and waging war against lawful authority." A murmur rippled through the crowd. "He was found near a burned stagecoach," Harlan went on. "He refused to give his name, refused to explain himself. That tells me all I need to know." Eli Boone's voice cut in, thin but firm. "Or it tells you he don't recognize your authority." Heads turned. Harlan's jaw tightened. "This is not a debate," he snapped. "This is justice." He faced Taza, stepping close enough to feel the man's steady breath. "You got any last words?" For a long moment, Taza said nothing. Then he lifted his head. "You wear the same badge," he said softly, "as the man who burned my people." The crowd stirred uneasily. Harlan laughed loud and sharp. "You Apaches see ghosts everywhere. I was a soldier. I followed orders." "Orders do not erase blood," Taza replied. Harlan's smile hardened. "You want to talk about blood? You killed soldiers. You hunted them. I hunted murderers." Harlan's face flushed red. He turned to the crowd, raising his voice. "You hear this? He thinks he's judge and executioner." He looked back at Taza, eyes cold. "I'll show you how real law works." He stepped back and made a show of inspecting the rope. "Sun's high enough. Let's get on with it." The deputies hesitated. A woman cried out, "Sheriff, don't." Harlan spun. "Anyone else care to challenge me?" Silence. Then Taza spoke again, his voice carrying without effort. "You have already challenged me." Harlan turned slowly. "Is that so?" "Yes," Taza said. "When you mock the dead." A hush fell. "You will hang me," Taza continued, "or you will not. But either way, you have called me. And the dead always answer." A gust of wind swept through the street, snapping the noose hard against the beam. The preacher whispered a prayer. Harlan felt something twist in his gut, old, familiar, and unwanted. He crushed it down. "Take him up," he ordered. The deputies moved at last, leading Taza toward the gallows steps. As the Apache climbed, he did not resist. He did not struggle. He walked as a man walking into memory, not death. Above them, a single crow landed on the crossbeam and began to caw. Harlan ignored it, staring up at Taza with a thin smile. "Legend or not," he said quietly, "you die like everyone else." Taza met his gaze, calm and unwavering. "Everyone does," he replied. "But not everyone stays dead." The rope was placed over his head. And in that moment, they did not hang him. No one ever quite agreed on why. Some said the rope snapped when they tested it, fibers unraveling like dry sinew. Others swore the preacher stepped forward at the last moment, insisting on prayer and delay. Deputy Mills later claimed the sheriff himself hesitated, just long enough for doubt to seep in. By midday, the gallows stood empty. Harlan announced the execution postponed until morning official procedure, he called it. He ordered extra guards posted, doubled the patrols, and locked the jailhouse like a vault. To the town, it looked like caution. To Taza, it was permission. Night fell thick and moonless. Clouds smothered the stars, and the wind returned, crawling low through Red Mesa's streets. Lamps flickered behind windows, then went dark one by one. Dogs whined and pulled at their chains. Horses stamped and snorted as if smelling something old and wrong on the air. At the jail, 4 men stood watch. They spoke little. The first guard heard something just after midnight, a soft sound like fingers brushing wood. He lifted his rifle and stepped toward the cell block. "Hello?" he called. The lantern guttered. When the second guard turned, the first was gone. No shout, no gunshot. Only the rifle lay on the floor, neatly placed. Panic bloomed fast but quiet. The remaining guards spread out, boots echoing too loud in the narrow corridor. One swung open the cell door to Taza's cage. It was empty. The chains lay coiled on the bench, unbroken. Then the lamps went out. What followed was not a fight. It was a lesson. Men were struck from behind, pressure applied just so enough to steal breath, enough to steal consciousness, never enough to kill. A body dropped. Another slumped against bars. One guard woke later swearing hands like iron closed around his throat, and a voice whispered in his ear, "Remember." By the time the sheriff arrived, gun drawn, the jailhouse was silent. 4 guards lay unconscious. No blood, no broken locks. No footprints leading away. Only markings. Apache symbols carved into the dirt floor and scratched into the jail wall with something sharp and deliberate. Eli Boone recognized them instantly. "They mean judgment," he said, his voice barely above a breath. "And warning." Harlan stared at the empty cell, rage and disbelief warring in his chest. He was chained. Chains clinked softly as he kicked them aside. Outside, Red Mesa woke in fear. A deputy was found tied upright in the street, unharmed but shaking, a symbol drawn in charcoal on his chest. The gallows beam bore a single carved line, deep and clean, as if measured. On the sheriff's office door, someone had etched a mark shaped like a broken circle. Luis Marino refused to open his shop. "This is not an escape," he told anyone who would listen. "This is a return." Harlan gathered the town at dawn, fury blazing in his eyes. "He ran," he declared. "Like they always do." No one cheered. "He could have killed my men," Harlan went on. "But he didn't. That tells you everything. You don't fear him. You hunt him." Eli Boone met his gaze. "Or it tells you he's not done." Harlan ignored him. "Form a posse. We ride at first light." As the men dispersed, fear lingered like smoke after a fire. Mothers pulled children close. Old men whispered prayers in languages half forgotten. No one slept again. Beyond Red Mesa, in the rocks north of Black Ridge, Taza knelt beside a small fire hidden from view. He cleaned his hands carefully, though there was no blood on them. He listened to the desert breathe. The jail had been easy. It was never the point. He pressed his palm to the ground, feeling the land, remembering faces, women, children, elders remembering fire and gunshots and laughter from men who wore badges and called it order. The symbols he had left were not threats. They were names. Judgment had begun. And by choosing the night, Taza had shown the sheriff one final mercy. There would be no mercy in the days to come. At first light, Red Mesa watched its sheriff ride out like a man chasing his own shadow. Sheriff Caleb. Harlan led the posse himself, 8 men armed with rifles, pistols, and a confidence that felt rehearsed. They moved fast through the northern pass, dust rising behind them in a long pale tail. From the boardwalks, no one waved. No one wished them luck. The town had learned the shape of fear, and it did not cheer for men who carried it outward. Harlan rode at the front, jaw clenched, eyes fixed on the broken land ahead. He told himself the Apache had fled into the hills like any hunted animal. He told himself the marks left behind were tricks primitive superstition meant to frighten weak minds. Yet as Red Mesa disappeared behind them, the desert seemed to close in. Tracks led them toward Black Ridge, at first clear enough to follow. One set of footprints, bare in places, deliberate. Then, without warning, they stopped. Deputy Mills dismounted and crouched low. And Harlan dismounted as well, scanning the ground. No signs of climbing rock. No signs of turning back. He doubled back, someone muttered. No, said Eli Boone, riding at the rear. He didn't. The sheriff shot him a glare. Then where did he go, Eli? Fly? Eli didn't answer. He stared at the rocks, at the shadows between them. This land don't always show you what it's doing. They pressed on Dot by noon. The heat was punishing. Water skins emptied faster than planned. Horses grew restless, refusing paths they'd walked a dozen times before. One mount reared suddenly, throwing its rider hard into the dirt. The man swore and laughed it off until he noticed the shallow cut across his saddle strap. Clean and precise. No one had heard a sound. By afternoon. One man was missing. Deputy Carter had ridden ahead to scout a narrow canyon. When they reached the bend, they found his horse tied neatly to a scrub tree. Carter himself was nowhere to be seen. Carter! Harlan shouted. The canyon answered with silence. They found him a quarter-mile away, sitting against a rock, breathing shallow but alive. His rifle lay beside him, unloaded. His eyes were wide, unfocused. He was right there, Carter whispered when they shook him. Then he was behind me. Did he hurt you? Harlan demanded. Carter shook his head. He could have. Didn't. The words tasted wrong. As evening approached, the desert changed. Wind funneled through stone corridors, carrying whispers that sounded too close to voices. The sun bled red across the sky, staining the rocks like old wounds. That night, they camped reluctantly. Harlan ordered double watch, but sleep came in jagged pieces. Dreams crept in firelight, flickering across screaming faces, gunshots echoing too loud, laughter that didn't belong to any of the men present. Just before dawn, a shot rang out. The camp erupted in chaos. Men grabbed rifles, shouting into the dark. When the noise settled, they found Deputy Lewis standing alone, weapon raised, hands shaking. I saw him, Lewis said. Right there. I swear. They followed his gaze to a nearby boulder. Carved into the stone was another Apache symbol, fresh and deep. Eli Boone exhaled slowly. He's counting us. Harlan rounded on him. Enough with the myths. He's one man. One man who knows this land better than all of us combined, Eli replied. And one man who ain't afraid of dying. Harlan turned away, fury burning hot enough to keep the fear at bay. We don't turn back. They moved deeper into the Badlands. By the second day, the posse was no longer hunting. They were being led. Paths narrowed, forcing them into single file. Water vanished. One man twisted his ankle in loose shale where no shale should have been. Another woke screaming, convinced someone had been standing over him in the night. Then the first death came. Deputy Mills found the body at dawn. One of the ranch hands, throat crushed, neck broken clean. His rifle lay across his chest, untouched. No tracks led away. Eli knelt beside the corpse, eyes grim. He didn't have to do this. Harlan stared down at the body, something cold spreading through his chest. For the first time, the sheriff understood the truth he'd been refusing. This was not a chase, this was a reckoning, and somewhere ahead. Moving without haste, Taza of Black Ridge was deciding how. The canyon narrowed until the sky became a thin blue scar overhead. Sheriff Caleb Harlan rode in silence now, the rhythm of his horse's hooves echoing too loudly between the stone walls. Of the 8 men who had ridden out, 5 remained. They no longer spread wide or joked to steady their nerves. They rode close, eyes darting, fingers tight on triggers. The desert had stripped them down to fear and fatigue. They found shelter at dusk beneath an overhang where the rock curved inward like a clenched fist. No fire was lit. No one argued. Even Harlan knew better now. Eli Boone dismounted slowly, joints stiff, and sat with his back to the stone. He looked older here, smaller beneath the weight of the land. "This is where it happened," Eli said quietly. Harlan stiffened. "What happened?" Eli lifted his gaze to the canyon floor stretching beyond them. "Bear Creek." The name hung in the air like smoke. "You're wrong," Harlan snapped. Bear Creek was miles east. Eli shook his head. "Army maps said so. But maps lie. This is the place." The others shifted uneasily. Eli went on, voice rough. "Village was camped down there. Women, children, elders, no warriors. They were waiting on a truce party. White claws raised." Harlan felt a pressure building behind his eyes. "That's enough." "You gave the order," Eli said. The words landed hard. Harlan dismounted, boots crunching on gravel. "You don't know what you're talking about." "I was there," Eli replied. "Scouting ahead. I saw the flags. I rode back to warn you." Eli's good eye fixed on Harlan. "You told me to keep my mouth shut." One of the deputies, young, pale, whispered, "Sheriff?" Harlan's voice came sharp. "We were under orders. Intelligence said warriors were hiding among them." "No," Eli said. "That's what you told yourself." The canyon wind rose, moaning low, threading through the rocks like a voice trying to remember its own language. Eli swallowed. Afterward, after the shooting stopped, there was one boy still breathing, crawling out from under his mother. You saw him. Harlan's hands curled into fists. "You raised your pistol," Eli continued, "and then you laughed. Said he'd grow up mean if we let him laugh." Silence crushed down. The young deputy stared at Harlan, horror dawning. "Is that true?" Harlan exploded. "Enough!" His shout ricocheted off stone. "You think I wanted that? You think I wake up proud of it?" No one answered. From deeper in the canyon came a soft sound, stone shifting under careful weight. Every man froze. A figure stepped into view atop the rocks above them. Outlined against the fading light. He stood unarmed, tall and still as if carved from the canyon itself. His gaze rested on Harlan alone. "You remember," Taza said. Harlan lifted his rifle instinctively, hands shaking. "I should have killed you." "Yes," Taza replied calmly. "You tried." The deputy stared, weapons half raised, unsure whether to fire. Eli spoke, barely breathing. "That boy was you." Taza inclined his head once. "I died there." The canyon seemed to exhale. "You lived," Harlan snarled. "You survived." "That's war." "No," Taza said. "That was murder." Harlan aimed higher. "You killed my men." "I judged them," Taza answered. "The guilty died. The others live with what they saw." A pause. Then softer, "As I did?" The young deputy lowered his gun. "Sheriff, we should stop." Harlan laughed, a broken, desperate sound. "You hear him? He thinks he's justice." Taza stepped down from the rock, slow and deliberate. No one fired. "You wore a badge then," Taza said. "You wear one now. It does not change what you are." Harlan backed away, fury and fear twisting together. "I brought law to that land. You brought fire," Taza replied. The wind surged suddenly, whipping dust between them. When it cleared, Taza was closer. "I spared your jailers," he said. "I spared your town. I spared you once." Harlan's finger tightened on the trigger. "Not again." Taza's eyes hardened, not with rage, but with finality. "Tomorrow," he said. You will stand alone. No badge, no men, no lies. He turned and walked into the narrowing canyon. No one followed. As darkness settled, Harlan stood shaking, the truth finally clawing free of the grave he'd buried it in. For the first time in many years, the sheriff understood. The hunt had never been for an Apache warrior. It had always been for him. Sheriff Caleb Harlan rode back into Red Mesa alone. Dust coated his coat and beard. His hat pulled low as if to hide from the eyes watching him from doorways and windows. The town felt different now, smaller, quieter, stripped of the noise that once fed his authority. No one asked where the others were. No one needed to. The posse had not returned. Harlan dismounted in front of the jail and stood there a long moment, listening to the creak of wood, the distant lowing of cattle, the wind dragging sand through the street. This was his town. He told himself that. He had bled for it, killed for it, shaped it with fear and force. But the fear no longer belonged to him. Eli Boone waited on the boardwalk, leaning on his cane. His face was grave but not surprised. He said you'd come back alone, Eli said. Harlan's eyes flicked up. He said a lot of things. He said you'd have a choice, Eli went on, and that you'd make the wrong one. Harlan's mouth tightened. You here to preach? I'm here to warn you, Eli replied. Leave, ride east. Don't come back. Harlan laughed hollow. Run, after all this? Eli met his gaze. This town won't stand with you anymore. As if summoned by the words, people emerged slowly, cautiously. Shopkeepers, ranch hands, women with children close at their sides. They formed a loose half-circle around the sheriff, keeping their distance. Luis Moreno stepped forward. We know now, he said. About Bear Creek. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. You don't know a damn thing. Harlan snapped. A woman spoke up, voice trembling but firm. We know you laughed. Harlan's hand twitched toward his gun. The crowd shifted back, but no one ran. You think that Apache's some savior? Harlan shouted. He's a killer. Yes, Eli said quietly. So are you. Difference is, he knows why. Silence fell. Harlan looked around, seeing not loyalty but judgment in their faces. The badge on his chest felt heavier than ever, like a brand burned too deep to remove. By tomorrow, Eli said, this town will have a new sheriff. Or none at all. Harlan's eyes burned. You don't get to take this from me. Eli's voice was gentle. It was never yours. That night, Red Mesa did something it had never done before. It refused the sheriff. Deputies turned in their badges and locked themselves indoors. The preacher closed the church. The saloon shuttered its doors. No lamp was lit for Harlan. No meal offered. No word spoken. He sat alone in his office, the badge on his desk, staring at it as memories clawed up from the dark fire, screams. A child's eyes staring up at him as he raised his pistol. Near midnight. A sound drifted through the open window. Footsteps. Measured. Unhurried. Harlan stood, heart hammering, and stepped out into the street. Taza waited at the far end of town. Beneath the gallows, he stood alone, unarmed, framed by moonlight and shadow. The rope swayed gently above him, the same rope meant for his neck. Harlan's voice shook. You think this makes you better than me? Taza's answer carried easily across the distance. No, then why? Harlan demanded. Because someone must remember, Taza said, and someone must answer. The town watched from the darkness as Harlan walked forward. Each step heavy, drawn by fate he could no longer deny. Tomorrow, the sun would rise on a town Dawn came pale and cold, washing Red Mesa in a colorless light that made the town look like a place already abandoned. No bell rang. No rooster crowed. The street lay empty except for two men standing beneath the gallows. Sheriff Caleb Harlan faced the rising sun, coat buttoned, gun belt low on his hips. He had shaved, hands steady now, as if resolve had burned the fear clean away. Across from him stood Taza of Black Ridge, feet bare on the packed earth, his buckskin quiet in the morning wind. He carried no weapon. The town watched from behind shutters and doorways, holding its breath. "This is how you want it?" Harlan said. His voice echoed too loud in the stillness. No rope, no crowd. Taza nodded once. "This is how it must be." Harlan glanced at the gallows. "Funny thing. Built that for you." Taza's gaze did not follow. "You built it for yourself." Harlan's jaw tightened. He drew his revolver slowly, deliberately, and held it low at his side. "You could have killed me a dozen times. In the canyon. In the dark." "Yes," Taza said. "But you would have died believing a lie." Harlan laughed bitterly. "And this fixes it? One dead man more?" "No," Taza replied. "One truth-faced." The sun crested the horizon, spilling gold across the street. Shadows stretched long and thin, binding the men together like a single shape split in two. Harlan raised his gun. "I don't regret surviving." Taza's eyes hardened. "You regret nothing." "That's where you're wrong," Harlan said, voice cracking despite himself. "I regret that you lived." The shot rang out, sharp and final. Dust kicked up where the bullet struck where Taza had stood, but he was no longer there. Harlan turned, heart slamming against his ribs. Movement flashed at the edge of his vision too fast, too close. Taza was upon him, not with fury but with terrifying calm. He seized Harlan's gun arm, twisting just enough. Bone cracked. The revolver fell into the dirt. Harlan cried out, stumbling back. "You don't fight like a man," he spat. "I fight like someone who remembers," Taza said. Harlan reached for his knife with his good hand. Taza stepped inside the motion, striking once precise, devastating. Harlan dropped to one knee, gasping, the wind torn from him. He looked up at Taza then, really looked. Not a demon. Not a ghost. A man carved hollow by loss, standing only because the dead had no voice. "You could end it," Harlan rasped. "Right now." "Yes," Taza said. He did not move. The moment stretched. The town waited. Why not? Harlan demanded, rage bleeding into despair. "Do it." Taza knelt so they were eye level. "Because you will stand." Harlan laughed weakly. "I can't." "You will," Taza said. "And you will be seen." Taza rose and stepped back. "Your death would be too easy. You will live knowing what you are." Understanding crashed down on Harlan heavier than any blow. "No," he whispered. "You don't get to decide that." Taza turned away. "I already have." Harlan screamed and lunged, reaching for the fallen gun with his good hand. Taza moved without haste, pivoting, delivering one final strike. Harlan collapsed beneath the gallows, the breath leaving him in a long, broken sigh. The town emerged slowly then, drawn by the certainty of an ending. Eli Boone was the first to approach. He knelt, checked Harlan's pulse, then closed his eyes. "It's done." Eli said. Taza stood apart, watching the sun climb higher. No one cheered. No one spoke. After a moment, Taza walked past the gallows, past the body, past the town that had once feared him. And no one tried to stop him. The badge lay in the dirt where it had fallen, dull, empty, finally meaningless. And Red Mesa understood that justice did not always wear a rope or carry a gun. Sometimes. It walked away at sunrise. Red Mesa buried Sheriff Caleb Harlan without ceremony. No bell tolled. No sermon was given. A shallow grave was dug beyond the town's edge, where the land turned hard and mean and the wind never stayed still. The badge was not placed with him. It lay on the undertaker's table for 3 days before Eli Boone carried it out and dropped it into the dust, where it vanished beneath a wagon wheel and was forgotten. The gallows came down next. Men worked in silence, pulling the beams apart and stacking the wood for burning. When the last post fell, the town seemed to breathe easier, as if something long lodged in its throat had finally been removed. Children returned to the street. Dogs slept again. The night grew quiet in a way it never had before. No one spoke of Taza at first, but stories have a way of rising when fear no longer holds them down. Travelers began to carry whispers down the trade roads of Alone. Apache seen on high ridges at dawn, watching wagon trains pass without harm. Of bandits found bound and alive near stolen cattle, marked with symbols no one dared erase. Of soldiers who turned back after glimpsing a man standing calmly where no man should be, as if the land itself had taken human shape. In Red Mesa, Eli Boone became something like a keeper of truth. When newcomers asked what happened to the old sheriff, Eli told them only what mattered. He met the man he tried to bury. The town never elected another lawman in quite the same way. They chose one of their own, a quiet woman who carried no gun and needed none. Order, they learned, did not come from fear, but from memory and restraint. Sometimes on still evenings, the wind carried the scent of smoke from faraway fires, and those who listened closely swore they heard footsteps where no one walked. High above Black Ridge, Taza paused once and looked back. The land remembered him. It always would. But his work there was finished. He did not claim victory. He did not claim justice. He carried names instead, names of the dead, names spoken into the earth so they would not vanish. Each step took him farther from Red Mesa, deeper into the places where the past still breathed. To some, he became a warning. To others, a story told softly at night. To the land, he was balance restored. And when children asked if the Apache warrior was real, their elders answered carefully, he was. They did not say whether he still lived, only that mocking the dead was dangerous, because